Ladies and gentlemen, I'm with the Honorable Anil Nandlall, Minister of Legal Affairs and Guyana's Attorney General. Um, I wanted to ask you, it's been 5 years since the March 2nd, 2020 elections, and we know there's a court case going on, unresolved, it's still before the courts. But I want you to take me back to that time, that date. I don't mean literally, but take me back to the events, perhaps the major parts of the events leading up to the March 2nd vote. And why did it take 5 agonizing months for GCOM to declare the PPPC the rightful winner of that election?
All right, thank you very much, Nazim, and good evening to your viewers. March the 2nd, 2020 will remain etched in the historical annals of Guyana as modern day most naked, unsophisticated, vulgar, and shameful attempt at altering the results unlawfully of an elections in a country. And people outside of Guyana to appreciate what happened on March the 2nd and the 5 months thereafter in the year 2020 must appreciate the history. And we don't have time to dwell much on the history. But the major political players in the country, the two main parties, the PPP and the PNC, have been in existence since independence and won rigged elections for 3 decades after elections and was only booted out of power after democratic reforms were brought and after foreign intervention and years of struggle internally and foreign observers being invited and electoral reforms taking place. And that welcomed the dawn of a new era. And the PPP won elections for the first time, legally and lawfully. That party that was rigging elections, the People's National Congress, never graduated out of that mode of rigging. Never. While we returned the country to democracy, and while there were foreign observers, and while we had elections from 1992 all the way to 2020, which elections were duly observed by foreign observers, which elections were conducted under a reformed and democratized electoral system, which elections were certified by local and international observers to be free, fair, and transparent. There were repeated attempts from 1992 all the way to 2020 by the People's National Congress to tinker with, to rig, to defraud, to commit illicit acts with a view of securing victory at those elections. It appears to me and to any objective bystander that they have given, I don't think they even tried. They don't believe in winning people's votes in the way modern electoral politics requires votes to be won. They don't believe in going on the ground and convincing people and persuading them to their side of an argument or to get them to win their imagination and to capture their vote, so to speak. They don't believe in that type of politics. They believe that government must be taken. And that is what you are fighting here. And that is what makes elections in Guyana different from most parts of the world. And people don't understand that outside of Guyana.
And during the debate over the budget, you had members of the PNC and APNU FC saying, "Where's the proof that there's been rigging of elections
That's
in the
correct.
past?"
So that these people have persuaded themselves, and I don't know if it's a mental condition, perhaps psychologists and sociologists can tell us, or mental health experts, how it is that a group can so convince themselves of an alternative or alternate reality. I guess it's a medical and mental condition that you can actually tell yourself something and then actually believe that it actually is the fact. So they have convinced themselves that they have been the victim of electoral fraud, I suppose, for all these years that they were out of government. And the most recent example of that is, as you said, their outpourings in the National Assembly during the budget debate. And up to now, they will tell you that they were rigged out of government, that the 2020 elections were rigged, and that they won those elections. But as you know, they can't produce any evidence of winning.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with that psychology, that mentality. I have said to people on many occasions, and let me give you this example quickly. I have spent more than half of my life in the People's Progressive Party and nearly 2.5 decades in the leadership of the party, going to several elections. And we spent a number of days planning strategies and planning elections and so on. And meetings that last over weeks. Every aspect of it that you plan out. Imagine on the other side, these guys, they spend the same amount of time, same amount of energy, but they plan how to thwart, subvert, and defeat the system. That's what their planning is. Because that is their electoral strategy. And we have seen it manifested. Burnham had mastered the art. That is why when they were not succeeding in rigging the 2020 elections, we saw them invoke the name of the Kabaka. All of that we have clippings of. They were invoking, why do you think they were invoking Burnham? They were essentially telling you and telling the people that, look, Mr. Burnham, you have rigged so many elections. Please help us now to rig this one. We are trying a lot of things and we're not getting through.
Right.
That is what they went to the Seven Ponds to do. And they are not doing these things in hiding. They put that on TV. They put that on the social media. Just 2 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Hamilton Green, former Prime Minister of this country, top leader of the PNC for decades, said at a lecture commemorating the birth anniversary of Burnham just a year or two ago, that if Burnham rigged the elections, he did the right thing. And if it is that we have to rig elections again, then so be it, we will do it. He also said that only one ethnicity should govern this country. Mr. David Granger, when he won the presidency just after 2015, he went to a meeting in Atlanta. And I don't know if they were not supposed to tape the meeting, but his speech was made public. And he said to that gathering in Atlanta, go back and reflect upon how we got into government in the 60s and how we stayed in government for all those years. And we must do that going forward. How they got into government was by a coalition arrangement, then they kicked out the coalition partner and they rigged every elections after that. That is what Mr. Granger, as leader of the PNC, was telling a PNC grouping in Atlanta. The point I am making, and I can go on to give you infinite number of examples, the point I am making is that this is the people's philosophy. This is their ideology. At every forum that they get an opportunity, you see this unfolding. So, get back to the question that you asked me.
So let me ask you this as a follow-up question to that. The leadership of the PNC now, they are, in your mind, in your understanding, evidentiary understanding, because you're a lawyer, you're a trained attorney, evidentiary speaking, they still adhere to that philosophy.
Yes, they do. And you don't have to accept what I am saying. They have rigged their own internal elections over the past 3 or 4 Congresses that they've had.
Interesting.
3 or 4 leaders of their party accused them of rigging the elections to elect the leader.
Internally.
But forget what they do they do it internally. They rig their own system. Now, if they are rigging against themselves, don't you think they will rig against you? Rigging, you see, when they listen to me, they would think that I'm being facetious and I'm being unfair in my characterization of them. Or the supporters might feel so. As it is part of their philosophy, it is part of their mentality, it is part of their physiology to rig. I am not. I am saying that I can produce irrefutable empirical data to demonstrate and prove beyond any rational doubt that it is their mind. It is part of their DNA when it comes to politics. That is how they understand politics. Politics for them is getting power by any means. That is the end all of politics for them. So, Ganesh Mahipal recently said that if they win the elections on this list that they are extremely critical of, they will accept the results. But if they lose the elections on the very list, they will not accept the results. Now, these statements are not off-the-cuff statements, you know. These are not knee-jerk reactions. These are statements that express the deep-seated thinking of these people. Look at the way, all right, let's just revisit briefly the appointment of James Patterson as the chairman of GCOM. First time that formula is being used with them being in government. First time since 1992. Mr. Granger is not a lawyer. He's a soldier. Before him it was, and Hoyt was a senior counsel. Corbyn is a lawyer. None of them had any problem with that formulation. That provision was there since Hoyt's time. Granger, not being a lawyer, or being a soldier, then had a tremendous difficulty in interpreting the simple provisions of that. And had the entire PNC base repeating like dumb animals after him that provision only requires judges, only qualified judges to be chairman of the Elections Commission. I don't know whether you are in Guyana. University professors were reading this thing that has been there 25 years before. No one ever had any problem with the meaning of this provision. And then suddenly, 30% of the population don't understand the simple provisions. None of the words in that provision Article 161 of the Constitution. Contain more than 4 or 5 letters. Very, very brief words. Meanings are clear. And nobody, suddenly, because Granger did not want to comply with the constitutional provision, great difficulty was encountered in reading and understanding what it says. Leader of the opposition, Jack Davis, submitted to him 80 names. For the first time, a list coming from the leader of the opposition was ever rejected. Granger rejected it. And not one list, 2 lists, then 3 lists. And then, in violent breach of the provision, appoints a person of his own choosing, defeating the whole intent of the provision, which was to get a chairman that enjoys the confidence of the president and the leader of the opposition. That's why the list must come from the leader of the opposition, but must find favor with the president. Right?
Okay.
And a whole host of people, 80 names, he rejected and then chose one by himself. And then that person that he chose began a course of action that if he wasn't stopped, the elections would have been rigged even long before election day. Quickly, he began a process of house-to-house registration, where he intended to scrap the existing voters list, existing national register, start a house-to-house process. They were doing it with such a speed that they were deliberately leaving out tens of thousands of people. 80 to 90% of those omitted would have been PPP supporters. They would have then constructed a list of national registrants from which a voters list would have been extracted, and that voters list would have been devoid of PPP supporters. So they would have won the elections without even going to the ballots. And that was the grand plan. The point I am making to you, that they don't believe. They had government, They had all the resources of the state. They could have campaigned. They could have spent money. They could have gone out there and tried to win mines. They could have gone and do the work, go into the fields. They could have gone into PPP bases and break up the base, as we are doing now with the hard work that we are doing. No. They like the plush offices. They like the overseas trips. So they do that, they become governors. They become aristocrats. They walk around only in suits. I have said to them, they even refuse to visit Sophia, which is where the headquarters is. That is a type of government. That is a style of government. So that was their game plan. But we were in the opposition. We live in a world where you have great freedom. It's difficult to stifle freedom anymore. You have technology. You have the international community. There is no Cold War anymore. The international community is resistant to autocratic and undemocratic government. We have all those things now as part of the free world. So it's difficult for them to rig. So, and then we have the Caribbean Court of Justice. And we had to take all these cases. We didn't win any of them. The GCOM matter, when I filed the case, I lost. Challenging the chair. I lost in the High Court. I lost in the Court of Appeal. It's only at the CCC that I won. We won. So all these combination of factors made it difficult. So we had to rush back to court to stop the house-to-house, the process, not the house-to-house process, but to stop the scrapping of the database. Because the scrapping of the database would have been unlawful. And the truth of the matter is, Nazim, that up to today, though we got a comprehensive ruling on that issue, that residency is no part of our law, and that you can live in Timbuktu, you can live in Africa, you can live in New Zealand, you can live in England, you can live in New York. But once your name is on that list, and you are a Guyanese, and your name can only be on the list if you're a Guyanese, you can come back and vote. And there are systems in place to ensure that you will not vote more than once. You are going to vote in the electoral division in which your name is located. Because the country is divided into electoral division. And you are registered at an address. And where your registration address is, that is in that electoral division you will vote. And there is no, and the system is structured in such a way that you can't vote in any other place. Still today, we have to battle with that. Every day, they have a different argument that they're putting out there. And why you think they're putting, they are not, anyone who believes that these people have any interest in free and fair election is either gullible, extraordinarily gullible, and is completely ignorant of the history of this country and their past, the past conduct of these persons.
Right.
Democracy is something that they are allergic to. Right? They are allergic to it. It's an allergy for them.
Yeah.
So don't believe for one moment that they care about democracy and they care about free and fair elections. Whenever they advocate a position, there is a hidden agenda. It's to provide the basis to do something sinister with a view of undermining the process. They have already determined that they can't win the election by popular vote. They know that. Nigel Hughes knows that in the AFC. Aubrey Norton knows that. The entire PNC knows that. They know that even if they collate, they can't win. And there's no difference between the two. The AFC entered the political equation of this country with great goodwill. They were the voice of reason. They were the middle class, decent people. They came because they said to the country that, look, the PNC and the PPP are two outdated, outmoded political organizations. We are the breath of fresh air. We are the modern Guyana.
The alliance. Change.
Yes, we will bring that change that is so necessary. Today, in my estimation, they are worse than the PNC. They are worse than the PNC.
Wow.
Right? So, March the 2nd,
March the 2nd was, according to the Carter Center, peaceful, normal election day. Everything went smooth. But the days that follow weren't like that. So I wanted to first of all talk me through how they abandoned the process of the SOPs, the statement of polls. What was in place and what did they do to set that aside and use a spreadsheet instead to tabulate the numbers for Region 4?
you see, and you got to get the mood as well. So after their efforts at that house-to-house process did not materialize, and they had to remove the chairman of GCOM, the James Patterson whom they put there, these things were happening quickly and very publicly. They were under pressure to come up with a new plan because that was their game plan. And that got tossed aside. The international pressure is building on them. The president, and they were holding as long as they could. Remember, they were supposed to go to an election within 3 months after their defeat in a no confidence motion.
Right.
They were holding fort all the time until they come up with another plan. While they are delaying, rather than them being able to make another plan, they were getting some serious body blows in the process. It is during that interregnum that the court ruled that James Patterson must go. Right? And then the court in Guyana, that's the CCJ, then the court in Guyana ruled, then the court ruled that the no confidence motion was validly passed. So those were two body blows that they didn't anticipate. So they were in a state of pandemonium. Then the house-to-house process that they had started, which was one of their trump cards. Again, that was stalled by a ruling from the High Court here that says that you can't touch that existing register. And then the new chairman of GCOM came in and scrapped the process, saying that if you can't touch the register as the court has ruled, then what is the purpose of this? Stop it. By all that time, Mr. Granger is under pressure to name a date for the elections. They were already 1 year or more out of time.
Yeah.
So they had to name a date. And so the plans were not coinciding. How are they going to rig these elections? So they were forced to go into it. They tried a few stunts with their co-agents in the electoral process. For example, there was a naked attempt to deny polling stations, adequate polling stations in PPP strongholds. We had to fight that. Mm-hmm. That would have led to thousands of persons being unable to vote before the close of polls. So they were putting 4,000 or 5,000 PPP supporters to vote at one polling place. That would have ended up in chaos. We had to fight that and get that corrected 2 days before elections, right? So you had battles all the way, but the public pressure was on. And it was difficult for them to pull off any of these fraudulent stunts that they had in mind. Mm-hmm. So, election day, you're correct. Not only did the observers say that it was normal, ordinary, peaceful, transparent, they said so, the PNC said so. President David Granger issued a statement to that effect. And many of their leaders are quoted on television and on the social media saying, in fact, they predicted victory. They said that they won the elections at the close of polls. It was during the course of that night. You remember, by 12 o'clock that night, all the political parties would have received their statements of poll or would have done their quick additions. And they realized that they lost. And that is when hell broke loose. By that time, you got to come up with a plan. This is not an easy thing to do. You had 9 other regions, 9 other electoral districts whose tabulations had already come in. They realized that they lost.
Right.
The only region that was left was Region 4.
The biggest region.
The biggest region. It was the only last card in the pack. So time was against them. The entire country was at Ashmin's building. The entire international community was there. The observer teams were there. It was difficult. Mingo had to fall sick because the fraudulent plan was not being executed in time. So they needed time. So he collapsed. When he went to the hospital, nothing was wrong with him.
The stress.
Right? No, he was not even stressed. I can't disclose to you that the doctor, nothing was wrong with him. Right? And that's when the spreadsheet came in. He was obviously directed to disregard the statements of poll and follow the spreadsheet. Thankfully, we had all the political parties there and the observers. And a great fortunate coincidence that sometimes we forget is that the Ashmin building has glass walls. And where the tabulation was being done was actually in a room with glass walls.
So you can see in.
So you don't have to be in the room to see. You could have stood outside of the room and saw the naked use of the spreadsheet, and that the spreadsheet did not bear the same statistics that were on the statements of poll. And the statements of poll is what was documented at the polling station the night. So the statements of poll has the results, right? So, and that is how that thing unfolded. And of course, you know the story of we had to go to court because Mingo, they had that machinery going at top pace.
But the statement of poll versus the spreadsheet, there was no legal precedent for a spreadsheet over the statement of poll. The statement of poll is the actual legitimate way in which you tabulate the vote.
Midway during the process, when he was using that spreadsheet, we went to court, got an order to quash the declaration that he made based upon that spreadsheet. He appeared before the judge. Lowenfield appeared before the judge. The chairman of GCOM appeared before the judge. And the judge explained section by section of the law and said in this tabulation process, the basis of the tabulation must be the statement of poll. That is what, if you want to project it on a screen, if you want to hold up the paper, if you want to put it on a cardboard, you are free to do all of that. But the base is the statements of poll. Nothing else. If you're going to transcribe this information on another document, then everybody must see that transcription. You can't come out with a document called a spreadsheet and say that you extract it from the statements of poll. More particularly, when you're referring to the spreadsheet and the people got the statements of poll in front of them, the figures that you are calling on that spreadsheet radically differs from what is on the statement of poll.
You are like totally for the PNC.
That's correct.
And
yes, and
none-
there's a consistent error.
Yeah.
The consistent error was the PPP was losing the most votes, and the PNC miraculously was gaining those very votes that the PPP was losing. It was a coincidence of the wildest kind,
Yeah.
right?
Almost like 1968.
So it was clearly fraud.
Yeah.
Clearly fraud. And when the Chief Justice gave that direction, he came back. They moved the operations from Ashman Building to take it to Kingston. Because Ashman Building was too public. This guy who they give the instructions can't deliver. So they took it to Kingston and they put roadblocks, blocking off one block away. And only selected persons, 2 persons per party, can go in to observe. And then they use the statements of poll, but they project it on a bed sheet now, not spreadsheet. And then they put, yes. People think, when I say this, people think that I'm joking. I'm not being joking at all. It was a spreadsheet that they put on a screen and there's a projector. But they put it at such distance that you can't see. But the man is recording. When he tell you 55 votes to the PPP, you are at the back. You can't see if it is 55 or it's 25. And if you ask them, they just change it flat. They move it to another one.
Wow.
A slide, a different slide come on. And they declare the election the same night, Friday, the 13th of March. I will never forget that.
Wow.
At 10 o'clock the night, by 10 o'clock the next morning, that Saturday morning, we were ready with another court case. We were told that the High Court is fumigated. We can't go to the High Court to file this case.
Wow.
The High Court was moved to Diamond Magistrates Court, Diamond Grove Magistrates Court, for us to hear that case, to set aside this declaration now. It was while we were arguing that case. There's so much paper you had to do in one night, you know. While we were arguing that case, that we got the announcement came of the agreement between President Jagdeo, leader of the opposition Jagdeo, and President Granger for a total recount. A total recount of the ballots. Now, we had signed
all of Region 4 or the entire country?
It was at that time, I believe, a recount of Region 4. I can't remember, but it became a regional. I can't remember the exact dates. But well, we passed through these people really. Everything used to take days and days and days. So I was present in the court when we informed the judge, who was sitting in a magistrate's court, that CARICOM has just brokered an agreement for there to be a recount and that we should put the case on pause. GCOM chairman was there, Alexander was there, Corbyn was there, and Trotman, their commissioners. I looked at how they started to behave bad in the court. They never agreed to that. Imagine they are representing the opposition and the government. Well, the government of the day then. The leader of the government is agreeing to a recount. And they are the representative of the government and the commission, and they are saying that they are not agreeing to that.
Wow.
That same Alexander who wants to play a Democrat now. I looked at him in his face and I said, hello, your leader has agreed. There's no need for you to agree. And he said to me, and I'm saying this on TV, I have no leader.
Wow.
I have no leader. And so they didn't accept these things willingly. And then, of course, to do the recount now, by that time the PNC imploded again because the PNC didn't accept, obviously, the position of the recount. Because they know a recount of the ballots cast, which were already counted, would lead to the same result. If you count 10 pieces of paper, and you recount that 10 pieces of paper, will you get 11? You don't think they know that? So they knew once a recount is going to take place, they will lose again. So they start another process of trying to thwart and prevent the recount from taking place. They rushed to the court. A lady by the name of Yulita Moore filed a case. They always pull these straw people. But it turned out that Yulita Moore was a candidate of theirs on their list. And their lawyers suddenly appear for Yulita Moore. And Yulita Moore is saying that she doesn't want the recount. And she's suing David Granger. She's suing Jack Dale. She's suing the PNC and the PPP. The same way that they did it with Esther Pereira. They create these straw people. Right? In Esther Pereira, they ask for the ID card to be used as a qualification to vote. They ask. The PPP agreed. We always keep conceding. The PPP agreed and put the law in the parliament. They have supported it. The law was passed unanimously. When they lost the elections, they're going to challenge the very use of the ID card. And they create this straw person.
1998.
1997, 98. The same thing they did. They created this Yulita Moore. Right? And they rushed to the court. Guess what? It was the whole purpose of the litigation. To stop the recount from taking place. That case had to go till to the Court of Appeal. Went all the way to the Court of Appeal before we get that removed. And then you had COVID to deal with. They locked down the country. All the observers they chased out. And the observers were prevented from coming in to observe the recount. So at every step of the way, you had to drag them. And when they go to the recount now, they're in government, you know. They don't want it to be streamed live. Now, I see they're fighting for camera in polling station. They want biometrics. We were asking them to do the recount live. They don't want that. They don't want that.
Wow.
I am telling you, this pack here, I have never seen a bunch so duplicitous in my life.
The one that gets me every time is the bomb threat in
Yes.
in Ashman's building.
That is their classic. That's a long been one of their main political weapon, bomb threats. So they called bomb threats several times during that period. Several times. They're the government and they're calling bomb threats, you know. Right? So, yes, we had several bomb threats. Ashmin Building, the Convention Center, and various places. Even at the courts. Many times they call bomb threats when we were in the courts. So that's a regular thing. Then they agreed. They said that they will accept only one observer team to observe the recount. They stopped the Carter Center from coming in. They stopped any other observer team. They say one team only. And there's a CARICOM team, in the words of David Granger, the president. He said they are the most, it was a word that he used, which I always remember. Anyhow, they were the most qualified team to observe the elections. So we said, no problem. Once we get a fair opportunity to participate in the recount, they were the only team to observe the recount, sorry. We said once we get a fair opportunity to participate in the recount, we know that once the ballots are recounted, then the results will be preserved. Now, as you know, if the ballots, what is a recount? A recount is a count back of what was counted. What was counted on election night? Not the ballots?
Yep.
And is not the ballots, the results of that total is what is tallied and put on the statements of poll? So if you recount that, if you count 52 cards in a pack,
So
and you recount it, that 52 cards you will get.
you're supposed to get, yeah.
Exactly. So they know that. So they know that if this thing is going to be recounted and the ballots alone will be recounted, as is the law in relation to recount, because at the elections only ballot matters. It's only ballot matters. They know that. So guess what? They can't allow the recount of the ballots to take place by itself. So they got a string of objections. Where is the statutory documents? Who cast that ballot? Where is the name of the person who cast that ballot? How many people are registered at this polling station? All sorts of craziness.
Wow.
To distract from the counting of the papers that were counted, that you saw,
And their people were there. at
and
the
your
poll.
polling agents were there, and you said that it was peaceful. You didn't see any fraud. And this is their contention. 15,000 people voted who should not have voted. You know, it's a crowd of 15,000 in a small population like Guyana. When the stadium has cricket and it's packed to capacity, it's about 7,000 or 8,000 people.
So double that.
When the cricket match is finished, when you look out of the stadium, as far as your eyes can see, you see people. Well, double that number. That's 15,000. 15 persons who are not supposed to vote will vote at an election in Region 4. And you wouldn't see. Well, then you and you're in the government.
Could the PPP have orchestrated 15,000 people to vote who weren't entitled to vote?
We are not in government. No one can dispute that they had control over low and field. They had control over the GCOM machinery.
Right.
They had control of the state. They are the government. And 15,000 aliens come into the country and vote and went out back.
15,000 dead people.
Dead people. No, they said some of them from New York. All kind of story. And these are
And
guys
they've
who say
never been able to produce a single shred of evidence.
none.
None.
I said
in
recently.
5 years. In 5 years.
In 5 years. They filed 2 petitions that never even, you know what, they're so incompetent they can't prosecute the petitions properly. One, they didn't even serve David Granger on time. The judge dismissed it for that. And the other one was thrown out. It went all the way to the CCG and the CCG threw it out. And these are guys who still got, they have the gumption to speak about these matters. If that happens to me, what I just outlined, I would either migrate or retire from politics. These guys are bare-faced. It's like they don't have any pride, they don't have any shame, and they come and tell you that they win the elections. But we are going to another elections, and these very people are still around. These very people are still around. I listen to people like, and I call their names because the people, the history, the public record of this country must record what they have said. I remember this union leader, what's his name? He's the leader of the TUC.
Yeah.
Can't remember his name.
Keith.
No. He said, along with Hamilton Green,
Lincoln Lewis.
Lincoln Lewis, Hamilton Green, and some others. They were calling upon President David Granger to not accept the election results. Don't accept it, just stay in government. These are anarchists, and they're still around. Today, I completed submissions in a case filed by Lincoln Lewis. I just submitted it to the court today. These guys are still around, and they are telling David Granger, don't accept the results. To hell with democracy. History will absolve you. You stay into government. You remain in government. These people have no place in a democratic society. And these are the people, 5 years after, we are going to an elections. And they are out there every day. And what are they saying? GCOM can't hold an elections. That's what they're saying. All the obstructionists' arguments are being put out there. They are obfuscating the issues. They're calling for biometrics. I am telling you, if GCOM concedes to biometrics, they will be the first one, when they lose the elections, to go and challenge the use of biometrics. As they did with the ID card, as the identical situation playing out. And the same Claudette Singh, she was the judge. She ruled against the PPP. She ruled in their favor. She said that the use of the ID card was unconstitutional, that it added a requirement to vote which was not provided for by the Constitution. They won the case, you know. She ruled in their favor. Today, she's telling them, based upon the same principles, she's saying to them that you can't put biometrics there if the Constitution doesn't enlist biometrics as a requirement to vote.
Criteria, yeah. Interesting.
Right? And when she said that then, she was a heroine. She's saying the same thing now. She has become the devil. Because she's not singing from their songbook. She's not supporting their ridiculous narrative. So, we have to be prepared to deal with these people. We don't have a lot of problems in Guyana, but this is a problem that we have. An obstructionist opposition who want government at all cost. And they recognize that they can't win the elections, and they are not prepared to work earnestly and honestly to win an election. They don't want to. They want to sit back and see how they can look at the system and either obstruct it and create a platform for disturbance and mayhem, or they can put in the system something that they would be able to undermine the system by or with, so that they can get their hands in some way. That's what they want.
So on this anniversary of March 2nd, 2020, when you look back at that 5 months and your own sort of philosophical, human, Guyanese, individual, I'm asking not as the AG, not as Minister of Legal Affairs. When you look back at that 5 months, what do you, put that in perspective for me.
Nazim, it's like a blur in my memory. I have to sit down really and think back, because there were so many things that happened so quickly. So many conversations, so many issues you had to deal with. But I would really prefer, I would really hope that the country doesn't have to go through this ordeal every 5 years. And it largely has to do with politicians, leaders, not accepting the will of the people. You saw the racist attacks that are now being meted out to Afro-Guyanese. Because, in the opinion of the racist leadership, these persons are betraying some cause. I said in another program that these leaders who pretend to represent the rights and freedoms of Afro-Guyanese want to control them and corral them into one political camp. If those Afro-Guyanese dare try to exercise the very rights and freedoms that this racist leadership is purporting to represent them on, if they only try to exercise those rights and freedoms, the world has witnessed the type of ridicule and attack that the leadership subjects them to. Simply because they want to keep the country divided for their own political interests. I have said, from the time the ethnic problem in our country dissipates, 50% of the political leadership will dissipate with it on the national landscape. We will immediately see the disappearance of that group that depends upon race politics and ethnic divisions to survive. If we can get our people tomorrow to start to see issues, then 2 or 3 political parties will just disappear. Because they have no track record of performance, they have no policy, they can't point to any achievements that they have done, they don't have a track record in democracy. All they hold on to is the basal instincts of race and ethnicity. They thrive on racial hostility. That is the oxygen that oxygenizes them. You take that away from them, they can't breathe.
Have no policy.
They will die. So, to sum up in answering the question that you have asked me, what happened in that 5 months period is well recorded and hopefully will be permanently archived, and we must revisit it because it's our history and we must never forget the lessons from it. We must learn it and ensure that it doesn't happen again. And hopefully we will evolve out of this type of cycle. We are going into it again, and from all indications, you see the usual suspects starting to put up the arguments, but fortunately, I am observing that they're not galvanizing the type of support that they would like to galvanize. Of course, you see the extremists in the leadership. That leadership is calling for street protest and there can not be any elections. That's the rants of the extremists that they want. They get, as I said, blood out of that. That's their lifeblood. To see people on the street, to see destruction. That's how they live. It's like a vampire. That's the blood. If that blood disappears, they can't feed.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we can deal with it that way.
Yeah.
And they will just be reduced to footnotes
In history.
in the history books of our country.
Mr. Nandlall, thank you very much. It's been enlightening. It's always great conversation to speak with you, and thank you for your time. And I hope people benefit from this conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting